Morning namaste. Gonna sing a song for you called Something's Calling Me. Something's calling me. Something's calling me. Something's calling me a little bit deeper than I've ever been before. Feels like I'm walking on marbles. Can't still the earth beneath my feet. And is my head in the clouds, my naked legs left dangling. I can feel my heart begin to pound. And everybody said, something's calling me. Something's calling me. Something's calling me a little bit deeper than I've ever been before. Long dark night, my soul it wanders. Can't see the light that moves in me. If God is everything, everywhere that I belong, Spirit gently wakes me from my sleep. Oh Lord, oh Lord, take me deeper than I've ever been before. Oh Lord, oh Lord, pull me deeper than I've ever been before. Oh Lord, I know I'm not the only one to live inside these blues. Oh Lord, oh Lord, I surrender my life to you. Oh Lord, oh Lord, I give my life to you. Love is calling me a little bit deeper than I've ever been before. Compassion's calling me a little bit deeper than I've ever been before. My faith keeps calling me a little bit deeper than I've ever been before. Peace is calling me a little bit deeper than I've ever been before. God is calling me, and I'm grateful like I've never been before.
We are grieving lives that ought not to have been lost. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery are the most recent in a list of countless unarmed African American and Black people who have been murdered for the color of their skin over the past 400 years in the US. Too many generations have suffered, and it has never been, and is not now, acceptable.
We denounce racism in all its forms. the starkness of unapologetic, intentional racism, the racism of silence in the face of injustice, the systemic racism inherent in our education, justice, income and opportunity inequity, and yes, the racism that lies hidden in our individual hearts and minds.
We envision a world where personal responsibility joins with social conscience in every area of the political, corporate, academic, and social sectors. We value a community-wide climate of safety that arises from compassion, justice, mutual respect, and kindness.
Therefore, we join our founder, Dr. Ernest Holmes, who, echoing the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., said, "You and I should form the habit of taking definite time each day to contemplate and affirm peace with justice. For there is no peace possible without justice, but faith without works is dead." We should not only pray, we should act, each contributing the best they have to the common purpose, each willing to make any sacrifice necessary, for there can be no individual self-preservation without the preservation of all.
We call upon ourselves and the faith communities in the U.S. to take action that shows we have heard the cry of suffering and we own our responsibility for it. Whether that action is prayer, donations to organizations that promote racial justice, rigorous self-education, or active engagement, let not this moment in history pass unattended.
May the actions we take be steeped in peace and respect for the sacredness of each life, knowing that whatever we do, individually and collectively, must be divinely directed from a higher consciousness. When we apply our proven spiritual principles through rigorous practices and compassionate action, the desired results cannot fail to demonstrate. As I read the names of some of those who lost their lives at the hands of police brutality, we invite you too, with us, to take a moment of silence. Clifford Glover, Claude Reese, Randy Evans, Yvonne Smallwood, Amando Dallo, Sean Bell, Oscar Grant, Tavon Martin, Jordan Davis, Jonathan Farrell, Aaliyah Jones, Eric Garner, John Crawford, Mike Brown, Tamir Rice, Walter Scott, Freddie Gray, the Charleston Nine, Sandra Bland, Corey Jones, Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, Terrence Clutcher, Keith Scott, Jordan Edwards, Stefan Clark, Bathum Shan, Atiana Jefferson, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd.
Welcome, namaste. So from this place of sacred silence, as we honor those lives lost, as we go into some time of contemplation, I'm going to share a quote from Oprah Winfrey. Living in the moment means letting go of the past and not waiting for the future. It means living your life consciously, aware that each moment you breathe is a gift. Living in the moment means letting go of the past, not waiting for the future. It means living your life consciously, aware that each moment you breathe is a gift. Living in the moment. Living in the moment means letting go of the past and not waiting for the future. It means living your life consciously, aware each moment you breathe is a gift. Living in the moment means letting go of the past and not waiting for the future. It means living your life consciously, aware that each moment you breathe is a gift. As we continue to contemplate this, I invite you to notice any place this might hit up against, any place that feels settled or unsettled. Taking it just a little bit deeper, exploring what comes present for you. Noticing places that we can heal, breathing that in, breathing the life source of spirit into that place. Living in the moment means letting go of the past and not waiting for the future. It means living your life consciously and aware that each moment you breathe is a gift. Living life, living in the moment, means letting go of the past and not waiting for the future.
It means living your life consciously, aware that each moment you breathe is a gift. And with that, I invite you to bring your awareness back to wherever you're sitting and anchored. Maybe taking in one more deep clearing breath. Welcome, Namaste. I am so honored to be with you this morning and to share this time. Thank you to our board for reading the statement from Centers for Spiritual Living on Racism. And thank you, Paulette, for bringing us into that moment of silence and sharing your time with us. I've been very moved this week. Started on last Sunday with the fear and seeing all the anger and the destruction that was happening. And then it shifted on Monday, going downtown and helping with the cleanup and feeling hope, seeing the community come together to help strangers board up stores, clean out glass, and clean up the debris that was left. And then on Tuesday, experiencing a calm and a quiet that I wasn't expecting, and seeing downtown Long Beach cleaner than I think I have ever seen it. And noticing the shift and energetically each moment. And noticing that even with the shifts, that it wasn't static, it's always changing. And so realizing in those moments that just because there was hope and community coming together, it doesn't take away from the message of the protest. And that change must happen. And that the protests are still going on. And that also brings me hope and action. And in this time of virus and the fear of being out and in the crowds, what am I doing? How do I take action? How do I support all that is happening and still support myself and my family and being safe and not getting the virus? And I feel myself on this wave, ups and downs. And so I know if I'm feeling that so are you. And so it comes down for me in those moments of unknown or unsureness that I take myself to that breath. I take myself first and foremost to the pause, and that also is action. So I invite you also, Namaste, to take what action you need to take for yourself, whether it be supporting the protest or sitting and taking a breath. What I know is it is all divinely guided. And in that, I invite us to go into prayer and begin our service. And for me, it begins with that breath. So I know that our time here today is blessed. I know that wherever we may be seeing this service, that we come together as one community, one mind, one spirit, one peace. So as I breathe that in, I know that ears are open to hear the message from our beloved Rev Bobbi. I know our hearts are open to receive the beautiful songs and messages that connect us so beautifully through Kong. I know wherever we are never separate. So I know that our time unfolds beautifully, gracefully, divinely driven. I am so very grateful for our time together, for this community, for the community at large. I am grateful for the protesters who are willing to put themselves out there and at risk to share a greater message. So wherever you are on your journey, I know it is absolutely perfect. And I just say, and so it is.
And so it is.
Welcome, Kong. So happy to have you here and sharing your voice and your song. You touch me deeply.
Thank you, Nicki. Thank you for all that you do and getting us set in the right intention this morning. It's been a wild week, and I think we have to ask ourselves, what would love do now? Just before you say something you can't take away, take a breath and let it out. Try to think about what would love do now. Wondering if you should cross that line for good. Whatever you decide, ask yourself from inside, what would love do now? Everything is either an act of love or a cry for love. That's why for love we try for love. In the end, that's all we know that's real. Whether right or wrong, doesn't matter just as long as you let your heart decide. Ask yourself from inside, what would love do now? Everything is either an act of love or a cry for love. That's why for love we die for love. In the end, that's all we know that's real. Whether right or wrong, doesn't matter just as long as you let your heart decide. Ask yourself from inside, what would love do now? What would love do now? What would love do now? What would love do now?
Thank you, Kong. And good morning to Namaste family. Hoping you are all well and safe. And I invite you now to speak out loud with me who we are. I honor the place in you in which the entire universe dwells. I honor the place in you which is love, truth, light, and peace. When you are in that place in you, and I am in that place in me, we recognize that we are one. Namaste. And together we speak our mission statement. I learn practical science of mind tools and practice in a loving, connective, and vibrant community to reveal my power and change my life. And the way that we do that is we awaken to the possibilities. We realize who we are and the power within. We transform. And then as we continue on life's journey, we repeat it over and over again, each time at a deeper and more healing level. And lastly, our power statements. We are a thriving, dynamic spiritual community. We are Namaste, and this stuff works, and indeed it does. I want to invite each of you to a special candlelight vigil that we are going to have at 7:45 this Tuesday, right before happy hour. We'll be using the happy hour Zoom. We want to honor our African American family members whose lives have been lost. Again, that's on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday at 7:45. Also, if you are interested in singing and being a part of the Namaste Choir, reach out to Julie Bathke or Marilee Adler. Their emails are on our website. We are having our first virtual choir practice this coming Thursday with our new choir director, Alan Arnett. So join us. It'll be great. Next up, we have our virtual happy hours are continuing, and on June 23rd, we are having our what's turning out to be a monthly town hall meeting. This is to update the community on what's going on with Namaste as far as our building, our finances, and just the different activities that we're putting together to keep everybody connected in this time of staying at home and staying socially distant. And then lastly, just a reminder that every weekday morning at 7 a.m., you can call in or use Zoom to connect with practitioners and others just to get some support and start your day off in a very positive, enriching way. It's good to see you. Namaste. I hope that this Sunday brings you a blessed week.
Thank you, Susan, for doing that, bringing us into what's happening at Namaste. This has truly been an extraordinary week. The month of June, which is typically the month of Gay Pride, is expanded to include support in a host of ways for our African American and Black family members, and we will continue to do that throughout this month, as well as to honor and celebrate Pride Month. So the message for this week is just breathe. And so I'm just going to invite Kong into this space again to open up this theme for our service today, which is just breathe, and bring in the music. So just rest in this message that he is going to invite us to as we move into this deep space of listening to what is ours in this idea of just breathe.
Breathe, breathe in the air. Don't be afraid to care. Leave, but don't leave me. Look around, choose your own ground. For long you live, high you fly, smiles you'll give and tears you'll cry. All you touch and all you'll see, all your life will ever be. Just take a moment and breathe. Breathe, breathe in the air. Don't be afraid to care. Leave, but don't leave me. Look around, choose your own ground. The long you live, high you'll fly. Smiles you'll give and tears you'll cry. All you touch and all you'll see is all your life will ever be.
Good morning, namaste. Again, this morning's talk is, let me get my slides up here, is a little interesting in its synchronicity. Our whole month, what we've chosen as our book of the month is Radical Compassion, learning to love yourself and your world with the practice of rain, which I'll talk to later as we move through this. The power of mindfulness, the power in mindfulness, is our theme for the entire month as we consider what mindfulness especially can do at this time. I mentioned the synchronicity in the talk title of Just Breathe, the theme of this particular service. This was chosen months ago. And so I find as we walk through some of the messaging that's happening out there, from the protests of I can't breathe to I can breathe now, really gives us a place to stand on, a place to hold as we move forward. I find it so interesting that the synchronicity of this talk title comes together today. And so I've thought about it all week, and the power of the breath, what this power is and how this power can operate through us. And it hasn't been lost on me this week as I've looked at how this can truly benefit each one of us as we seek and explore and even take steps for how we can be at this time. It's so interesting to see that two significant events have occurred at with global impact. Not just one happening globally, but more than one happening with COVID and the protests around the police brutality and the violence against the African American Black community. I find myself this entire week figuring out how I can be. And so I'd like to start with a little bit of a story that showed up, and it's actually in the book of the month. And so you can take a look at that. I encourage you to read this. It's been quite a support for me this week. The Buddha came to become enlightened, and it certainly didn't happen overnight. But the bigger story comes when he finally decided, after practicing varying spiritual practices, to sit under the Bodhi tree. And he meditated through the entire night. And it could have been multiple nights for that matter. But in this particular case, as he meditated that entire night, the shadow god Mara came to him and presented to him a number of energies to tempt the Buddha, which was Siddhartha at the time before he became the Buddha, tempted Siddhartha with greed and hatred and different delusions. He presented him with storms, beautiful temptresses, raging demons, and massive armies to distract and move him off his place and space of presence. But Siddhartha met them all with the practice of being awake, with presence, and specifically compassionate presence. The next morning, as the morning star appeared, Siddhartha became the Buddha. After that period, he traveled throughout India teaching and about presence, about freedom, about compassion, and many gathered to hear him. And as he taught, all those years after that incident of enlightenment, the god Mara would continue to appear in the crowd, lurking at the edge of every gathering in which the Buddha was there teaching. One of his attendants, Ananda, would spot the god Mara lurking at the edge of the gathering. And she would always say, "Terrible news, the evil one has returned. We've got to do something." But each time the Buddha would say with great kindness, "Not so, Ananda." Then he would stroll over to the god Mara and with a firm but gentle voice say, "I see you, Mara. Come, let's have tea." And the Buddha would treat Mara like an honored guest. What's interesting about this story is that no matter what was happening in the Buddha's life, even when he became the enlightened one, that struggle and strife and challenge continued to present itself in his life. And I often wonder if, even in my own life, as I'm thinking about, as I practice presence, and sometimes as I think when I am able to do that, that certain experiences, events, and situations won't appear in my life. And they do. They continue to appear in my life. But what he's inviting, what the Buddha is saying here, is that they continue to show up in life. So invite them to come sit with me and have tea. Ernest Holmes says that only when we put our very best into our spiritual work will it satisfy us. Let me just pause right there. He's not talking about when our life becomes what we desire. He's talking about when our life becomes our spiritual work. So only when we put our very best into our spiritual work will it satisfy us. Sometimes there's a tendency to get caught up in what I can manifest, and what ultimately we end up manifesting is a perspective of how situations, of what we see, or what our perspective is of situations that show up in our life. I'll continue. A spiritual power is released through true thinking. That is as much a law as chemical affinity. There is no deliverance of the real self without mental conviction. To have faith in God is to follow this faith through by having faith in the self. The real self is God, and as such is to be implicitly trusted. The spark which burns at the center of our own soul is caught from the living and eternal flame of the Spirit. Here are two incidents that are happening, two major situations in life. What I find common in them both is connection, relationship, belonging. Here we are in COVID asking to retreat and still find ourselves belonging, or at least the desire for belonging. And here are protests for this question, this question of when will we all belong? When will we all be treated fairly? When will we all be treated as if we matter and that who I am has value? Both are asking us to explore this idea of relationship. And what comes from that is that as humans, we tend to live isolating lives. As we've retreated, have we isolated ourselves? Probably. I know I have in some ways. This situation of retreating has just gently, passively, I've slid into some isolation in some sense. But what's interesting as humans is the very way in which we learn is in relationship. And so it's vital for us to come out of this solitary cocoon and connect with one another and see how each of us together, individually and collectively, matter. And that the connection, this belonging, is what facilitates a higher level of personhood. Our longing to belong, even in COVID, and take this in the perspective of what COVID is asking and what the protests are doing, it's allowing us to connect with others with a sense of love. It's asking us to form a bridge between our longing and belonging, where we bring into the self from the world. There is a greater connection with the whole. This sense of belonging, this sense of longing to belong, is what can transform our world, because it invites us connect to each one in this experience in new ways, not just the typical ways. Here we're doing it virtually. And yet, even as I'm sitting here, I'm imagining, I have this vision in my mind and I'm seeing comments come in. I'm imagining all those that are either listening to this, watching this, and even connecting with each other virtually this morning. There's an illusion in this sense of lack, or this sense of solitary, this sometimes practice of isolating ourselves. There's an illusion in that. And part of the practice this month that I'm going to invite each one of us to do is, we are living in a dense forest of illusion. It's what's caused and created everything around us. What is my illusion? What is my dense forest of illusion? Because it is a dense forest. And there's a tendency to have all these situations, experiences, and events, to walk through them as I've always walked through them. Even if some of you may have participated in the protests of the 60s, this time is different. I should say that with respect to news, I have not, because I was very, very young when they were happening. So I didn't participate and didn't really know they were happening. But as I've read about them, I see this to be similarly, although again, it's happening globally. There are protests to raise the question of how we treat one another, and specifically the African American community. And I say that from a sense of we're all community, but we have segregated what matters by saying that certain people matter and certain people don't, based on the color of their skin. And we're being invited to look at the situation and see, where have I contributed? Here's the kicker. We've all contributed to it. There isn't one person on the planet that hasn't contributed to what is being asked of. It isn't just the police. It is the systematic racism that is part of who we are, that we must continue to look at, that we must ask, as the Buddha did. We must ask that to come sit with us so that we can, in presence, see what I've done, see what I do to change it, and what can I be. And there is no one on this planet that invitation excludes. When we are acting as we always have through a situation like this, there are things that show up for us that we're being invited to let go. Old thinking, old beliefs that are affirmed by old habits. And yet, I will say there is good news in this. Metaphorically, collectively, materially, something is shifting. Everything is shifting. And we're seeing it on this mass scale. And I've asked myself all week, what is this that I can do? What is this that I can be right now so that I contribute to a world that works for all? And in preparing for this month, presence and compassion were two things that came up for me specifically that would bring me to this idea, or to a truth for myself, in which when I'm present in the experience, where I can meet people where they're at in that experience, and can I hold, no matter what is presented to me, whether it is I agree with it or I don't agree with it, can I hold it, invite it in, as I said earlier, invite it into tea, so that we can sit and I can listen. Because what's so parallel to that is the protesters have said, I want to be seen and heard. And when I say that, it's to be seen and to be heard means that we are valued and that we matter. And spiritually, it's recognizing that we are all one, and that what happens to one happens to all. If one is not free, none of us are free. I imagine right now that it feels like, in some cases, at least I have throughout this week, I have felt sometimes a bit walled off and separate. Tara Brock in Radical Compassion, she says, you're in a trance when you're living on autopilot, when you feel walled off and separate from those around you, and when you're caught up in feeling fearful, angry, victimized, or deficient. When we are lost in the forest, there's an invitation to create this clearing. And the clearing can only happen when we pause and we turn from the clamoring thoughts to become aware that our experience does happen from moment to moment. And that we can, if we listen, know what to do moment for moment, what to be from moment to moment, but we have to listen. And sometimes what we are to do is nothing. Sometimes what we are to do is something, but always to be present if we can. And I say that without, I want to make sure I don't say that there are moments if you're not present that you should judge that, because that's part of being human. The conversation I'm having with you today is the invitation to be present, so that we all have compassion, not just for our African American family members, but for the entire experience, because we cannot meet anger with anger. It's okay to start that way, and it's important to speak our story. It's important to feel that anger. And there's where the balance lies. It's important to invite that anger in and understand what it is. It's important to express that anger as it comes up, because sometimes that's where change happens. Right now, as spiritual beings having a human experience, mindfulness in this radical time is where our power is. Awakening requires mindfulness and compassion. And right now, there are parts of our world that are caught up in reactivity, self-judgment, blaming others, pettiness, selfishness. We see it on social media. There are days where I'm looking and watching social media, and sometimes the only thing I can do is just cry, because of the things that are said and shared that don't honor the collective humanity. At the same time, to create a world that works for everyone, we must be kind, we must be compassionate, we must be radically compassionate, we must be brave. Oftentimes, I forget the appropriate question for the time, but I think what Kong shared in his song is, what would love do? What would love do? And when I ask that question of myself, when I ask that question of even others in in a conversation that gets beyond what we're trying to do here. What would love do seems to be the question that I ask that brings me back to center. Viktor Frankl said that between stimulus and response lies a space, and it is in that space lies our freedom and the power to choose a response. In our response lies our growth and our happiness. To participate fully, to participate and engage in a way that is clear for me, I need to provide that clearing, and I need to pause to get present. Earlier this week, as I watched what happened on Sunday with the protests in Long Beach and then the riots and looting that followed, as I watched, most of you, I was torn between what was happening, and my heart being with protesters and my anger over the looting. And as the next morning, as I got up early, I actually texted a couple people and asked them if they would join me in the morning to go help clean up Long Beach. But I wanted to wait for the invitation, which came out early the next morning. And a few of us went down to the downtown area of Long Beach. And as I parked my car and walked past our building, I saw that graffiti that had been sprayed on the gates that we had dropped down had been already cleaned up, and it was 7:30 in the morning. We grabbed our broom and buckets and whatever we could, and we started to walk the Pine Street all the way down to Pike. And there were over 1,000 people on the street. I say that over 1,000, there's probably a few people that had joined together, that had come together in love to respond, not just because of the looting and the rioting, but also there was this, for me, it felt like to create a container that the message would not be lost. And that's an invitation, so that the message is not lost. There was a clearing that was created on Monday. And when we create a clearing, like what happened on Monday, life appears again. It opens us to the unfolding of radical compassion. It allows us to listen, to hear one another, to hear what the underlying message is if it isn't obvious. Presence, that clearing, allows us to make a U-turn, to be awake, to be open, and to be tender with one another. There are spiritual traditions. Tara Brach says, many spiritual traditions describe presence as an open, sunlit sky. When presence is full, like the sky, it is luminous and boundless, and it provides warmth and nourishment for life. All kinds of weather systems pass through it: happiness, sorrow, fear, excitement, grief. But like the sky itself, presence can hold them all. All that happens, these significant events that are happening on our planet, they are teachers to us as we walk this path. They invite us to become an instrument in them. They invite us to become an instrument in them. And in that is an invitation that love compels us to live differently, to act differently, to step in differently, to rise up differently. When we make that clearing, when we do that U-turn, when we go within, which is just to see what the answer is, we find intentional, open decisions from that place of oneness that can bring us through this time. In closing, I'm going to ask that we read this together, but if you already started reading it, like I say on Sunday in the sanctuary, just stop for a moment. Namaste stands with our African American Black family. They are part of us, and we will stand with them, and we will do what we can to truly create a world that works for everyone. We will do that. We will continue to open up to what is ours to do. That is who we are as Namaste. That is who we have always been. So let us not refrain from that. Let us, if we do get occasionally caught up in the anger of competing messages, let's hold to the only message that is true, that we are one. So read this with me. I breathe mindfully. I may intend, speak and act with the power of mindfulness, doing what is mine to do, manifesting a world that works for all. I want to thank you, Namaste, for joining us this morning, for being in this space together collectively. I want to invite you to join us Tuesday night at 7:45, where we would take 15 minutes and do a candlelight vigil, where we would continue to honor and do our part at this absolutely critical time in our evolution. So I will just hold us in prayer right here and right now, knowing that there is only God, there is only Spirit, there is only the one mind, knowing that we are a part of it. That which is God, which is joy, which is sorrow, yes, which is compassion and love, it is oneness, it is intelligence. We are all part of it, we are all of it, which means it all exists within us. So I unify each one of us that is part of this community, that is part of this global family of all creation. I recognize that we are one. I walk through this experience and affirm this truth for each one of us, to always remember that we are the peace and the love. If we want peace and love, we must bring that. So I affirm our intention to do that and to step in that love and that peace, to listen more, and to hear the voices of those that are suffering, that have suffered for 400 years, to step in and be that voice and join and participate as we are one. I bless this community that is Namaste as we walk through this for each other and the planet. And with that, I say, and so it is. Amen. At this time, I'd like to invite you, if you haven't already, for this is a time of conscious giving, to step into that place and space, so that gift that is yours to give to this community, that is our tithe, our offering, our place and space in which we play from that which allows and affords us to recognize our own individual and collective abundance. Take that gift and let us put it right here on our heart. If you are an auto tither, I ask that you do that here. For those of you that give on a regular basis, go to Give Plus Online, and you can either do it through PayPal or Venmo, and do that. And as you do that, whether it's auto tithe or you're about to do that, let us hold the truth of this abundance of who we are, the gift of who we are, of our time, treasure, and talent. Let us bless that at this time. I allow this blessing to be in its power, as the power of the word. And in doing so, I release it and let it go. And so it is. Amen. So our prayer today, and I'm going to ask Tori to put both Kong and I up. As we do this prayer, hey Kong, how you doing?
Doing very well.
Let us say this prayer, and then after our prayer is done, we're going to do our beautiful song, our Namaste. But I want us to consider the prayer that we're about to share together before. And if you're home, whether you're with others or you're alone, say this out loud with us, because there is power in the word. And when I do say it out loud, there is some power in that. So if you feel comfortable wherever you're at, let me just invite you to do that. So here we go. The power within me is blessing all creation and is forever healing all with whom I come in contact. The power within me is God, spirit, conscience, presence, and it must bless, help, and heal all who come near it. Silently, the work goes on, and silently, all are being supported by this inner power that is operating through and as me. I give thanks that this power within is silently blessing and supporting everyone to whom my thought reaches. And so it is.
Thank you, Namaste. Thank you, Bobbi, and all the practitioners. Sing along from home if you can. Sing loud. You guys know this one. I am the song. You are the melody. I am the voice of harmony. I am the heart of all eternity. I am Namaste. I am the color of diversity. I am the people remembering to be free. I am the love of all eternity. I am Namaste. I am the way. I am the way. I am Namaste. Yes, I am.
Namaste. I just want to thank some folks today that participated in our special service today. I want to thank Tori, who's been director today, and believe me, I thank you so much.
Thank you, Tori.
Which allows and affords me the opportunity to step a little deeper into the message today. For Nicki and her beautiful meditation and share, and Susan, as a member of the Board of Trustees, doing our announcements. I also wanted to express my gratitude to Debbie Ann, our board president, Chris, and Ray Bradford, and Paulette, who shared that beautiful CSL statement, Center for Spiritual Living statement on racism and the elimination of it. I want to thank our practitioners for supporting our service always, and for Debbie Ann and Julie for welcoming all of you into the space that we call our virtual church. Join us Tuesday for our candlelight vigil, and let us continue to be present this week, to remember who we came here to be, this time that we chose to be part of. Let us also choose to be present in that experience. So I thank you, Calm, for the beautiful music today. And really, I just invite you to be present this week, invite you to be safe, and also listen to that tells you to be the truth of who you are. And with that, thank you, Namaste, and have a beautiful week.